awesome site. It's called the CIA Fact Book, World Fact Book. And so what you do is you select a country. So our first country that we're going to study is Canada. So I scroll down, find Canada, and now it loads the Canadian page. Hopefully you won't get sick while I scroll. So it gives you all the different information here on Canada. So we're going to scroll down to find something about infant death rates. Infant mortality rate right here. So in Canada, we see that total, there's 5.04 deaths per 1,000 live births. So roughly that's 0.5% death rate. Okay? So they would record that first piece of information, scroll back up to the top, then we'll pick a different country. So we'll say Sudan, which is in Africa. Scroll back down to about the same part of the page. Infant mortality rate. So all of a sudden it's 82.43 deaths per 1,000, which is higher, a lot higher. And so we want the kids to kind of not just look at these statistics and say, well, these are just numbers, but actually start to think, well, why is it that children are more likely to die at birth in Sudan versus Canada? What do we have? So we have different questions to interact with them. So this is the first site, and we give a number of sites. CIA Factbook is the best one, but there's various sites that they can actually explore data on. So now I will go to, we have this graphing website, which is pretty nifty here. And so this graphing website, they can enter a title, infant mortality, and then they pick their countries at the bottom, Canada, Sudan. And so you're able to alter your bar graph here, and so you can show what you want. And so the 6 countries would go at the bottom, and each group would make a graph like this. So this is, you can change the graph site if you didn't like this one, but this is one that we thought was pretty good. Now, the last part that they're going to have to do is go to this World Mapper site. And this is the one that Tashia originally showed us in her lesson plan. And so there's a ton of maps. You just search for whatever you want. So I'm just going to search infant. And it comes up with infant mortality. And all of a sudden you see, the kids will, that, hey, everyone else in the world has a higher infant mortality rate than we do in North America. And so we would want them to incorporate this into their presentation and to interpret it, to explain meaning behind it, and so on. So this is kind of the last part of their assignment, and this will be part of their presentation as well that they'll give. So, assessment.
Okay. For the assessment, we have it broken down into a couple different parts. We would assess them on their presentation. So did they speak clearly? Was their graph correctly labeled and accurate? And, and then a little bit more into the deeper issue, like did they consider these world issues? Did they actually look into things? Did they research? That kind of thing. Then also the assignment questions that we had posted earlier. They would have those written out, and they would use those assignment questions to help their presentation. But we'd also like to see what they wrote down for their assignment questions. And finally, we would have peer and self-evaluation, which we have a rubric made up in here. I don't need to show you, though.
So just for the peer and self-assessment, there's a rubric that we found on the website, but you could definitely change it to how you want it to look. So it just, you go through both, there's 2 pages, you go through both sides and you do a self-assessment, and then because they're only in groups of 2 or 3, because they're in grade 9 and like more than that would be too much for them to handle, I think, then they each do one on each other. And then on the second page, the very last section here is group and partner teamwork. So as a group overall, they would rate themselves how they thought that they did. And it's just so you can mark them on the same scale as a group, like use the same rubric as a group, and then you can see discrepancies or where, you know, if they think they work really well together and you thought they were, you know, goofing around, then you can maybe talk about those issues also.